The title of today's sermon is 2026 and Sunday Laws. And I believe what I'm going to share with you indicates that the end is near. We don't have a lot of time left. So it's important for us to be about our Father's business because of that. And I'm going to make a suggestion of something that if we have been doing, fine, but if we haven't been, we need to start. There's a little news note that I came in touch with when we were down in Atlanta at the church where I speak. They are very focused on end-time events, and so I always learn a few things when I go there. And there was this little news article, why 2026 will be the year of Leo. From the National Catholic Register of December 31, 2025, here's what they said. While 2025 will forever be remembered as the year the Catholic Church got its first American Pope, 2026 is likely to be the year that he begins to fully make his mark. Now that's a biblical term, mark. Mark of the beast. The Bible calls it in Revelation. So it is anticipated by the Catholic Church that he will be set up. I believe it's they plan to do it July 4th. Yeah. Most notably, the U.S. bishops plan to consecrate the nation to the Sacred Heart of Jesus ahead of the 250th anniversary of the American founding. As you know, it was founded in 1776. So here we are at 2026. Even while overall levels of religiosity continue to fall. In other words, attendance at Catholic churches are shrinking. Stories of young people drawn especially to Catholicism and its more traditional devotions and liturgical expressions have seized both secular and Catholic attention. And you may have noticed that in the news, that they are really pleased with how many young people are flocking to the Catholic Church. The recognition of an American saint would be a fitting highlight for a year set to be marked, there's that word again, by both the consecration of the country in its 250th anniversary year and the full-fledged reign of the first American Pope. Now, if you know history at all, you know that our forefathers came to this country to get away from the Catholic Church because of the oppression that the Catholic Church did upon them in trying to practice Protestantism. And so apparently there's been some real developments since those early days to where the Catholic Church feels they can announce, we control the country. We're going to dedicate this country now to God as a Catholic country. And we're going to expect a lot more people to become a part of it. Another piece of news that I received was a document from the Heritage Foundation. And probably most of you have heard something about the Heritage Foundation. But this is a group of people who have made the decision, and apparently they've been in existence for quite a while, they made the decision that they're going to capture the control of the government so that the government only passes righteous laws. What is righteous in their eyes, anyway. Yeah. What they don't know is the primary one they want to establish is going to kill this country, actually, in the end. But, of course, they don't know that. So here's some of what they have to say as of the 8th of January, 2026. On July 4, 2026, Americans will remember how the Founding Fathers won their freedom and established ordered liberty through a system of limited government, federalism, and the rule of law. Well, that part, of course, is true. In understanding their crowning achievement, Americans must recognize that the Founding Fathers were, quite literally, fathers. 54 of the 56 signers of the Declaration of Independence married and had a total of 337 children among them, an average of 6 each. Now, you don't notice it here, but their understanding of liberty is different than yours. Their understanding of liberty is freedom for the Catholic Church to do whatever and to rise to any level of power that, they would desire. That's their idea of liberty. They don't have the idea of liberty for everybody to practice their religion how they see best. And then they start building their case based on the idea, which is not true, that the primary purpose for the Founding Fathers was to protect their families, as to why they set up the documents that have controlled this country. The task of the authors of this special report is to propose ways to remove the many obstacles blocking the formation of healthy families, to make marriage and family life easier, and to restore family to the center of American life in rhetoric and in reality. Now, at first glance, this doesn't look like a problem. The benefit of society is based on the family. If the family isn't strong, society will not be strong. But notice how this idea plays out. The next little section is titled Support for a Uniform Day of Rest. As zoning laws allow a community to determine where one can operate certain businesses, blue laws reflect the local judgments as to when one can operate certain businesses. So they jump from zoning laws to religious laws and say it's the same thing, that the government has the right to do both. The Founding Fathers did not believe that. And the Constitution does not really allow that. Then they quote, in the case of McGowan v. Maryland versus Maryland, 1961, the Supreme Court held by an 8-1 vote that Sunday closing laws that include the purpose of providing a uniform day of rest are constitutional and can accommodate the fact that the majority of people who take a day of rest for religious reasons do so on Sundays. Now, because the Supreme Court made that decision, did they make the right decision? No. They were not understanding the true meaning of the Constitution. And so this is very concerning to anyone who believes in religious freedom and in religious liberty. It should be very concerning. Now, I've heard our president say that his idea of religious liberty is that religious people can speak. And it used to be illegal to promote a candidate for office in church. But our new president doesn't think it's wrong to do that. It's okay, because Christians need to be allowed to speak. But what this is setting them all up for is to make more steps in the future, because their understanding has been mixed up. Now, there's a book that was written years ago. I still haven't read it all, but this problem actually stems way back to the late 1900s, when there was a strong push for Sunday laws, and the people that were striving for Sunday laws achieved some success. And so there are things in the way of precedents that took place in the past that the person can of course build upon. But that doesn't mean that they're judging right when they do that. Massachusetts, for example, requires that every employer of labor engaged in carrying on any manufacturing, mechanical, or mercantile establishment or workshop shall allow every person at least 24 consecutive hours of rest in every 7 consecutive days. I don't know why they quoted that, because we could live with that if that's all it went to. Because we do take faithfully 24 hours, and we close down whatever we have to do with for 24 hours, unless it's like a health program where you can't close at all. So that wouldn't be too bad, but somehow they take a leap from that to not using that phraseology. Day of rest laws limiting commercial activity are usually found in less densely populated counties, although restrictions on alcohol sales are more widespread. Though greatly diminished, blue laws persist in some form in close to 28 states. Now, I didn't take the time to check out this idea entirely. I think the majority of the 28 states only has to do with alcohol. And some states have laws that you can't sell alcohol until church is out. But there's probably a few states where there's still blue laws in regard to what you can do in your home on Sunday. I don't know which ones it is, but there was a website I could have looked at that tells you the story of every one of the states. So they're right in regard to this. These places serve as a sort of legal reservoir. In other words, we can use these cases to promote our agenda. Once their day of rest laws are abolished, they are very hard to restore. So I was wondering, what about Georgia? Well, Georgia is one of the safer states. They've almost all been abolished. There may still be some liquor ones which won't bother us at all. And I looked up Alabama, same thing. Now, Georgia's blue laws were abolished earlier. Alabama just did it not too long ago, not too many years ago. So we can praise the Lord that those won't come back on us until they have to be passed again. And apparently it is depending on the area, and so some areas may never pass it. And that's going to depend on us. If we don't want Dade County to pass blue laws, then we're going to need to be doing something. Going on, a uniform day of rest that limits commercial activity can provide temporal boundaries that help communities to set aside time for religious observance, family gatherings, outdoor activities, and rest. Now, in that book I read about the history of Sunday laws, I noticed that there was a big ball game. It was either ball game or Olympics. I don't remember which one it was. I think it was a ball game. And it was scheduled for on Sunday. And it ended up, being forbidden, that they couldn't do the ball game on Sunday. But, of course, in this, I don't know what they all mean. Will be okay. The first two are fairly easy to know what they mean. What they want to allow by outdoor activities is another one, and another thing altogether, and rest. A stable base of research shows that these practices correlate with better mental health, stronger social bonds, and more stable family structures. And of course, that part is true. People, Seventh-day Adventists, they keep the seventh day on a regular basis. They get all those benefits, get better mental health, stronger social bonds, and better families. So it's true. But it doesn't have to be on Sunday. If you keep Sabbath, you get the same benefit. Here's the rationale for closing the businesses. With the advent of on-demand delivery, shopping can be shifted easily and conveniently to other days of the week. By restoring a common rhythm of rest and reflection. And there is something to that part of it, the common rhythm. Have you ever watched the video about the Sabbath beaver? Yeah. That every seventh day, the beaver keeps that day. How about the Sabbath ox in Siberia? That of course he may be dead by now, I don't know how old the story is, but every seventh day, the ox won't work. And even though he's being used or was used in a prison camp, he still won't work. They can't get him to work. So they say community rest laws could help to reverse the trend towards spiritual homelessness and foster the social habits necessary for communities to cohere and flourish. Now here shows a total absence of understanding what makes church people do better. It's not just because they go to church on a certain day. It's because they have a relationship with God. And if people are forced to go to church, it's not going to accomplish the objective. So what impressed me the most is how the enemy has been able to get people's thinking twisted around. And you know who are the ones that are at most fault for that? Seventh-day Adventists. We haven't been doing our work. We haven't been getting the word out about, we've tried to get it out about the fact that Sunday laws are coming, but we haven't gotten out the truth about religious liberty and a whole bunch of other things that would have kept a lot of people, at least, not all, a lot of people from coming to these conclusions to where they think that this is a good plan. And I don't read this to blame them or to bash them. They're doing what they think is right. But we still have some work we can do, but we're going to have to do it soon. I just wrote down in my mind, what are the points that the people that drew up this document didn't understand? Well, first of all, the founders of this country came here to escape the requirements to worship in a certain way. Now, they were all Protestants, or most of them at least, at that time, because the Protestant Reformation had broken the power of the Catholic Church. But what happened is quite a few of the churches did the same thing that the Catholic Church was doing. And so the people that came to this country were trying to get away from the oppression of religious leaders. Sometimes it was the government too, because they had a state church. And so they were getting away from that. And the strange thing was, when the Puritans got here, they did exactly the same thing. And it wasn't until Roger Williams, who was persecuted by everybody else until he got his own state set up, which was Rhode Island, God used this pastor to introduce the true principle of religious liberty. And enough people got convinced so that when this government was set up, the founding documents have it in there. They are prohibited from saying you must worship God in this way, which means they cannot mandate worship on Sunday, according to the document. They cannot establish a state religion, according to the documents. But because their understanding has slipped as to what it means, they will do it. We know they will due to Bible prophecy. The Constitution was written to protect minorities. The majority don't need any protection. They take it by force. It's the minority that needs protection. Now, I heard this from others, but in the 2025 plans of the Heritage Foundation, there was provision for Sabbath keepers. But in the plans that they've laid for 2026, there's no provision. They scrapped that already. They have achieved enough of their objectives that they don't have to put that in there anymore. And now their real purpose is coming out, that what they want is to everybody to keep Sunday. they are misinterpreting the Constitution to suit their wishes. Some of them don't know, but some are, they know that's what it means, but they are misinterpreting it. Also, blue laws were enforced in the past, that is. They were enforced by fines, imprisonment, and forced labor. So it won't take the national Sunday law for these kind of things to start popping up. If this thing continues in the direction where it's going. That's already been done in the past. Seventh-day Adventists have been on chain gangs. They have been put in prison. They have been fined very large fines for doing things on Sunday. That brought to mind this interesting parable found in Luke 16, verses 4 to 6. The unjust steward got caught. He was stealing from the owner of where he was working. And so the owner called him in and said, "You're going to get fired for what you're doing." I don't know why he didn't fire him immediately, but of course Jesus was trying to teach something here. So here's what the unjust steward said to himself. "I am resolved what to do, that when I am put out of the stewardship, they may receive me into their houses." So he called every one of his lord's debtors unto him, and said unto the first, "How much owest thou unto my lord?" And he said, 100 measures of oil. And he said unto him, "Take thy bill, and sit down quickly and write 50. And he would say, "It's paid in full," when he paid only half of it. Going on, then said he to another, "And how much owest thou?" And he said, 100 measures of wheat. And he said unto him, "Take thy bill, and write 80." So he said, "Just pay 80, and it'll be paid in full." And the Lord commended the unjust steward because he had done wisely. For the children of this world are in their generation wiser than the children of light. Now you have to really think about that one. Why would Jesus compliment this unjust steward? Well, what he's trying to do is give a lesson for us right this moment, right now. Actually, it would have been better if we'd paid attention to it much sooner, but certainly right now. And that is illustrated in a little story that I'm going to read about what happened to Ellen White in Australia. In Australia, the news came that a Sunday law was going to be enforced. Not just passed, but enforced. And nobody was to work. Well, we were very careful to get on the right side of the officers. And when we had our fruit orchard, we would get some of the fruit and we would take it to those who were in the legislature. And we would distribute these all around. So they decided we're going to take some of our delicious fruit from our orchards and we're going to give it out to the legislators. Every time we would get on the cars, that means the train, but I think it should say they, on the cars, they would say, "Oh, what a feast we had on what you sent us." Then our people said, "What are we going to do if these should come with the Sunday law and close up our work?" Well, it is not here yet. Now, some Adventists are panicking as though it's already happened. No, it hasn't. So that's good advice. Well, it's not here yet. We said, and while it is not here, for Christ's sake, go to work and do everything that you can. But these officers, they ride around here every day. "Yes," said I, "but they do not see you." What does she mean? They saw them, but they didn't report it. They didn't do anything about it because they were friends. We have tried to make friends with them, and they do not see that you are working. They do not make any report. Now, eventually, and I'm going to give a second sermon in 2 weeks to give more details, but we know that eventually the pressure will be so hard that they cannot protect you. But look at how much longer it will allow us to keep on working if the local the local people or your neighbors that live next to you don't turn you in because you've been good to them and you've been a blessing to them and they don't want to turn you in. But as I say, we have to know the time will come where enough pressure to save their own skin, they'll still turn you in. Or they'll become a Seventh-day Adventist, one or the other. You know, it's going to go either way or the other. But if it should be so that men are put into office and they should try to carry out that law strenuously, what shall we do? So this story takes us to the next step. What do we do when they say, "You don't work on Sunday at all"? What shall we do, you ask? Well, do what I tell you to do right now, beginning before it comes. So we're supposed to start this even before that particular point comes. Dedicate Sunday to God. Sunday as your working day. What does she mean? Soul winning working day. Take your students that you have, take your students with you, and go from house to house. So before actually it gets real tough, and there's no better time than now, that we should begin to work in doing this type of ministry to those in the community, to those that are in power in the community, that we take an interest in them, not even telling them always why we're taking the interest in them, but maybe the point would come where you could share that there's something, you know, like Esther had to prepare the way before she shared with the king what was on her mind, that the Lord will open an opportunity to explain to them the mistakes that are in the reasoning of those that are trying to set up a Sunday when nobody can work. Let the teachers take a number of students and go into the bush and there ask them if they will let you give a Bible reading. Take right hold of the matter. Soon we had evening readings in private houses, and they began to take hold of the truth. And we had a good little company that had come out into the truth. Now, when we go door to door, generally now, we ask them can we give you Bible studies? And of course, when we start, it's our doctrines. This is different. Pick the Gospel of John or some other book that's not very threatening and suggest, would you be open to studying the book of John together? Would you be interested, if they agree, to have some of your neighbors, invite some of your neighbors to come, and we'll study the book of John. And, later you can bring up other things, but this Bible reading, apparently, they did what Ellen White told them to do, and they got some group Bible studies going, studying the books, different aspects of the Bible. You can do this. Instead of thinking that God would not sustain you if you should give up that day to Him. So now people are going to worry about, how do I make a living? If there's 2 days I don't work. Well, here's a promise. If we take 2 days off, He still will provide for us. Amen. So you can do this. Instead of thinking that God would not sustain you if you should give up that day to Him, you must not think any such thing. He will. He will bring souls into the truth. Their tithes will be brought in just as soon as they come into the truth. Their tithe to support the work. So, of course, tithe doesn't help us locally, but other offerings will come in from those that join us. And so we have more money. If we had enough money, we could even hire a Bible worker here. And there's a student at Wildwood that has been a Bible worker. Now, he looks a little unusual. I don't know how some of you would react. But he has been quite successful in getting Bible studies where he came from. And so in my mind, I've wondered, would it be possible to get a Bible worker here? But anyway, we might have to grow before we can do that. From Last Day Events, page 133, says, when our nation in its legislative councils shall enact laws to bind the consciences of men in regard to their religious privileges, enforcing Sunday observance, and bringing oppressive power to bear against those who keep the seventh-day Sabbath, the law of God will, to all intents and purposes, be made void in our land. And national apostasy will be followed by national ruin. I don't know if you're familiar at all with what's happening in Russia right now, but those poor people are suffering big time. Their economy is destroyed. Their confidence in the government is totally destroyed. They've got chaos. The lifestyle, or you might say the comfort of the common people is almost gone. No heat in the buildings. And I mean, it gets cold over there. And they're suffering. The people in Russia are really suffering right now. When national ruin comes to the U.S., that's what's coming here. It's a glimpse of what's going to happen. They think they're going to be better off, and this country will be able to rule the world. That's what they think. But instead, it will be the opposite, and this country will suffer national ruin. So this helps us, should help us, to be truly motivated, to really try to help those that are sincerely mistaken, that sincerely believe that it's going to be a good thing, And the only way we can do that is by promotion of the true principles of religious liberty. I believe God has really stirred up a whole bunch of young people to give out the Great Controversy. Because in the Great Controversy, there is a chapter that explains true religious liberty better than any other place you can get it. And so that book needs to be put, and we can distribute too. You know, they haven't come to Trenton yet. So we can distribute that book while it's not called hate literature, which I think it will eventually be called hate literature. And it also shows the history. Apparently, some individuals are saying the Dark Ages were a wonderful time. Boy, Great Controversy puts that one aside. The Dark Ages were the worst period of Earth's history, other than maybe just before the flood took place. And the reason it is because there was no religious liberty, period. And people were being killed by the hundreds of thousands and millions. And so it was not a good time. And perhaps the worst definition, or the worst example of what the Dark Ages were like, is the Reign of Terror in France. And what happened just before the Reign of Terror and after. The poor people of France, they have suffered beyond description what they had to go through because of what their government was doing. It's all there in the Great Controversy, and people can read it. And if you haven't read it in a while, you might want to refresh your mind of what went on before, when these things were able to be done.